Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Adam and Bruce, co-founders of 8STEM. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you both on the show. I think what you guys are doing is actually kind of revolutionary and quite interesting. But maybe before we actually dive into what exactly 8STEM is, let's get to know each one of you a little bit better. First, maybe Adam, since you're kind of the CEO, let's let you go first, and then Bruce can give his background.
Sure, sounds good. Yeah, I started my love of music when I was 11 or 12 years old, which, orients me. It's like 25 plus years ago.
Sure, that's great, man.
Listening to, a kid of the Northwest, listening to the music coming out of the Seattle scene, and kind of feeling like even as a really young kid, like a 6th or 7th grader, being able to feel like I was a participant in that scene. I couldn't go to clubs or anything, but everybody was really talking about the local music in the scene. I started playing instruments and guitars, which led me to playing in bands, and just generally being obsessed with music and the creative process. And wound up finding my home kind of behind the desk, after years of playing, a decade of playing in bands, behind the desk in the studio, making people sound good. It was really, sort of challenging for me to deal with musicians and all of the personalities with musicians in bands. But I could get these knobs, the knobs would always move the same way. I could get the little boxes to do exactly what I needed them to do. And so it started this love of production and making people sound good and creating new things out of recorded material. And so that led to a stint as a touring artist. I got involved in the rave scene in the mid '90s, and I never actually became a DJ. I was what was called a live PA, which was I was traveling around the world with racks of synthesizers and drum machines and all of these gadgets to play live, blistering techno music for people in warehouses. It was super fun. And that was my kind of like, I'm always looking on the fringe for a differentiator. There were a million DJs, but hardly anybody was foolish enough to carry all their synthesizers around the world on planes. And I was one of them. The production led to, music production is all about technology. So the transition into the world of digital and getting into, making music with robots, essentially drum machines. And that was just sort of opened up this like technology being leveraged to foster creativity, in the music space. And so it's always been something that I do. I haven't been a music producer like as a job for a really long time, but I still do projects when interesting projects come around and studio work and things like that just to stay engaged. It's basically like, once you can never really put it down once you're bitten by the bug. It's like, people who journal or write or play an instrument, you're always doing it, whether you're doing it for work or play or whatever. So that was my kind of like, intro into music and where it took me.
Sure. So I'm curious to know about kind of the home automation stuff that you've done.
Yeah. And so I was touring as a musician at the time, and I wanted to go to college and study computer science. This was like 97. And, so I moved to Santa Cruz, California, and enrolled at UCSC, studied computer science and philosophy. And I just dug in. It was kind of like the building blocks of everything that I was using in the studio was, it was like, computer languages, programming languages that manifested in sound. So I started studying and really digging into that. And at that time, it was almost like, it was the first round of the tech boom, and things were just going crazy. And I got pulled out of school to be a founding member in a tech company. And it was kind of like it was like one of these tech companies where all these like really smart people came together, and they all brought like whatever discipline they were in before to it. And so I was bringing my discipline of music to the scene, and it was right when Flash websites were
sure. I remember those days.
Were kind of like all the rage, right? And so I was writing
yep.
music for websites, and we were doing like, you know, Flash animations on our websites, and it made everything look super cool. And that was kind of like the catalyst that, I mean, I actually, you know, to this day and age, I'm not sure that we ever even sold anything out of this company. Like, I don't know if we ever but we had a shipping department, you know, with people like, you know, shipping managers in it and all of this crazy stuff. And we had offices in 9 countries after, you know, like 6 months of being quote unquote in business. And we were actually a public company on a foreign stock exchange. And we did all of this stuff. But, you know, at that time we were about 20 years too soon. And, you know, we all thought that touch screens on your phone were, you know, like 2 years out, and really they were like 8 years out.
Sure.
And so that was what really kind of killed it. But that was my intro into actually like developing technology products. And at that time it was hardware coupled to software, and both were really clumsy. And so I mean, I always kind of just like, I like the back end sort of nerdy, the nerdy back end that makes things go and makes lives easier. And that was my intro to that. So I mean, I stayed close to it, and I like engineering and making things work.
And Bruce, do you maybe want to kind of give a bit of a background on yourself? Obviously, you are, you know, co-founder or founder of Subpop Records, and so for people that don't know kind of your contribution to kind of the entire music scene, maybe do you want to kind of give people a bit of background on yourself and Subpop?
Yeah, sure. I am indeed the founder of Seattle's Subpop record label. I've been a long-time music fan ever since I was a child. I spent most of my money on records from age 10 on. I became involved with college radio when I came out to Evergreen State College back in 1979 in Olympia. And this radio station had the most comprehensive collection of independent music in the United States. Essentially, I've been a long-standing fan of music, and in particular, a long-standing advocate of independent music. I've always worked towards being in work environments that involve creative people, and that's what eventually led me to start the Subpop record label in Seattle in the late '80s.
Sure. Okay. No, that's great. So, walk me through, I guess walk people that don't understand maybe or kind of know the music industry that well. Like, you've signed and Subpop signed kind of some of the greatest bands of all time, right? And so obviously probably when you were signing a lot of them, you had no idea kind of where they would end up going. And a lot of them are still kind of touring and playing today. But I think why I ask that is because I think it really leads into kind of what you guys are doing at 8stem. So do you maybe want to kind of talk about some of the bands and some of the kind of history behind that a little bit?
Sure. Well, in the late 80s, I had noticed that there was a particular sound coming out of the Seattle area,
Sure.
which eventually became called grunge. And Subpop signed Nirvana, Soundgarden, a number of bands that people have heard of.
Sure.
There's a group we worked with called Green River that eventually went on to form Mother Love Bone, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney, and so forth. So Subpop did what a lot of classic indie labels did, which was focus on a particular region and then help blow that up. Now, in addition to working with bands, I'd also worked with the photographer Charles Peterson, who helped kind of advertise the scene. I worked with the producer Jack Endino, who helped produce a lot of these artists. So a record label really is it's a support system for creative people that involves more than just musicians, a wide variety of creative people.
Sure. So I'm curious, obviously you guys are both kind of co-founders of 8stem. What exactly is 8stem? And I'm curious to know how you guys met.
Yeah, I mean, well, we could maybe I'll go with the how we met
Sure.
first, because
Sure.
it sort of leads into this. So Bruce and I both have residence on a remote island in the Pacific Northwest called Orcas Island.
Okay.
And Bruce moved up there after sort of exiting from the day-to-day at Subpop. And it's a remote island with 5,000 people on it, serviced by a ferry boat, no bridges or roads or anything like that to it.
That's
and
cool.
And I went there after my my tech company imploded, and was looking to just do something radically different.
Sure.
And Bruce and I met at a fundraiser dinner for a children's like a private school, and we were just kind of the two weirdest people there. And we hung out on the steps outside of this building. There was a dinner party going on. We started talking about music, and that led us into Terrence McKenna, and interest in sort of like wild philosophies, and we just kind of hit it off.
That's
and
great.
And we became friends and just started. We were just two people talking about our mutual obsession with music, and all kinds of that whole rabbit hole of trivia that goes on there, and Bruce was obviously very knowledgeable, and I had heard of Bruce before, but we hadn't ever met. So we spent the next decade or so attending music festivals together and talking about doing something in the music space, because we were both looking kind of like what's next. This is the business and the culture had sort of started to stagnate a bit. And begin to lose, continue to lose value after the introduction of the digital file format. So we've been talking for almost a decade about what's coming next before we decided to actually jump in with 8stem.
Sure. So for people that haven't heard of 8stem, what exactly is it? And was there like a defining moment that you guys were like, okay, we need to build this?
Yeah, I mean, so what 8stem is a mobile application. The end user experience is it's a mobile app. And it's a mobile app that allows you to remix music on your phone and then share that with your friends in social media. And so what that actually looks like is like if you're listening to a song and you think that the saxophone solo is annoying. A lot of people think that. You press a button and the saxophone solo's gone. Or you said, you know what, I'm listening to this chorus right now. All I want to hear in this chorus is the vocal. You press another button and only the vocal is playing during the chorus. So it allows you to interact with music like a producer does in the studio, but you can do it just on your mobile device.
Sure.
So it's like it's a way, it's like taking the listener experience, like uniformly all music listeners press the play button and then they wait for the song to finish. And some people turn the bass up on their amp, and other people turn the treble up on their, on their amp, and they make subtle adjustments to it. But in the studio, producers are working with all of these different audio elements, and you get to decide how the final composition comes together. And so we're taking the listener experience of pressing play, and we're moving it one baby step closer with rails on it, so you can't make it sound bad, but giving the user that ability to like take things out, put things in, move the chorus, in front of the verse instead of after it, and then save all that together and then share it with your friends.
Sure. So for people, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just see it as a very powerful creative tool. And in the same way that the indie rock culture helped encourage young bands to put out their own records, 8stem is allowing young amateur music fans to become remixers.
Sure. It's almost kind of like the people that are dedicated enough in kind of the, like back in the, well, I'm sure people still do it today, but like almost like put out a fanzine or something. It's kind of that type of level of commitment, right? And I think it's great to be able to kind of modify and change kind of some of the tracks by your favorite artists, right? I think that's really powerful and really cool, and kind of people listen to music all day, every day, whether they're at work or maybe not school so much unless they're doing homework. But I think a lot of people listen to music, all the time, and being able to kind of interact and change parts of it. It was really cool to me when I kind of discovered you guys a month or so ago, or a couple months ago. So I'm curious. Sorry?
I'm glad you're stoked. I just wanted to throw in as well, just for me growing up in the 70s and 80s and going to punk clubs and seeing fans become super fans, and then maybe a week later those super fans are on stage starting their own band and then maybe putting out their own single. I've always been really intrigued by that whole dynamic between the super fan and the amateur artist. I think HSTEM is helping to facilitate a similar trajectory for super fans, and the super fan actually becomes the artist through the stepping stone.
Sure. No, I think that's actually really cool. So how did you guys recruit the actual artists to work with you guys? Was it some connections you guys had in the music industry? Did you cold call a bunch of people? Was it kind of a bit of both?
Are you asking on the musical side?
Yeah, on the musical side.
Yeah. Essentially, we're networking with a lot of artists that we had made contact with through West Coast festival community, as well as the Seattle music scene. Very similar to what happened at Subpop, which was just working with friends and friends of friends.
Sure.
And once the momentum started to happen, other artists started to contact us. For example, this artist Gotch from Japan.
Very cool.
Adam?
Yeah. You want me to riff on that?
Adam, do you want to riff on? Do you want to riff on what's been happening with Gotch from Japan? Because I think that's a perfect example of how HSTEM is starting to become.
Sorry for that beeping. I just had it back up there for a second. So,
yes, HSTEM is becoming a global phenomenon, and I think this Gotch project is a perfect example of where we're at right now.
Sure.
Yeah. So part of it, Kevin, is like, you have to experiment when you're building something entirely new. There's really no precedent for this in existence yet.
Sure.
There's never been a consumer-facing device that allows anyone, to interact with multi-channel audio, with like studio audio.
Sure.
And so we're constantly looking around for like, different styles of music. We don't know what's going to catch or what people are going to respond to. So you just start putting things out, and we've got just every different style that we can get in the ecosystem right now for demo purposes. And this artist Gotch, who's the lead singer for a fairly well-known band globally called Asian Kung Fu Generation.
Okay, sure.
They came to us and said, we're going to put out a new single on a bunch of different formats.
Interesting.
And they did vinyl and CD and then also put it out on HSTEM. They were like, well, let's do retro, and we'll do retro, and we'll do future. And so we put the song out on HSTEM. So we take it and we have our producers add a bunch of different, a lot of different elements that end users can play with and create new stuff out of. So it's like you have a whole bunch of ingredients to create new stuff. And so what we saw in that was really interesting. It was almost like when that artist put it out to his network and people came in, the engagement metrics went berserk. And we had and it's actually creating a remix. What we're trying to do is really democratize the process and make it very easy.
Sure.
But it's still taking this esoteric, very complicated art form that barely anybody knows how to do, and trying to deliver that to the masses in their phone. So it's not it's really biting off a lot technologically and design wise.
Sure.
But we're seeing it like people are really actually getting it. And it's impressive to watch, and it's neat to see how people in different countries who have different relationships with technology actually respond to respond to the process and what they do once they're inside. And so we're tracking all of those things to see, to look for signals of what's fun for people, where do they get stuck, how do we improve the process, and also what music do people actually want to engage with in this way.
Sure. No, that's great. So when you bring on a new artist and they send you the tracks, do they have to send you obviously the different, like the guitar on a track, the bass on a track, or how does that kind of work?
Well, we ask for it to be broken down to 4 stems. So what a stem is, is a grouping of similar audio elements, right?
Got you.
So in the studio, as a producer for the drums, you'll have like toms and a kick drum and a snare drum and a hi-hat and everything on all of these different tracks. Like everyone is isolated. But in 8-stem, it's just a stem file called drums. And that's just everything is grouped together, right? So we break it down to lead, which is vocals or a lead instrument. Bass is another stem. Drums is another stem. And instruments is another stem. So it's 4 elements make up an original audio, an original track. Sure. And then we have other basically infinite numbers of other tracks that we can put into that are complementary, that mix with the original, and then you blend all of these things together to create something new.
Sure. No, I think that's actually really cool. And I was when I was playing with the app is actually like really intuitive. So I'm not surprised that you guys are getting good response from your users. And I think maybe some of the credit goes to Apple because they've spent a lot of time kind of allowing people to, tweak audio and video in kind of their own apps on a touch screen device. And I think you guys have kind of leveraged some of those ideas in the app to kind of make it your own, but it's pretty kind of intuitive in the sense that, like, I didn't feel like I had to learn something new to interact and kind of, play with the different kind of tracks and stuff like that. So I think you guys did a really good job of crafting an interface for touchscreen that allows people to edit and play with and kind of, build their own kind of tracks or remix their own tracks.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's really encouraging to hear that. I mean, it's when you're building out technology, it's really, it's not about me and it's not about Bruce. It's not about anybody who works in our company. Like, we're user centric in our focus, and it's really all about, like, you can build the world's most magnificent thing that takes this super complex task and makes it really, really easy. But if people can't figure out your user interface, it does not matter at all.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, so, totally. Yeah, no offense, but it didn't work. And so that's kind of our process, is constantly just gathering data and trying to refine it to make, little things simpler. It already does. What we've actually built in terms of audio and engineering, it already does all of the things that we need it to do in order to create the things that we want it to create. But the presentation of those things and those features, and then the learnability of how to actually do those things has yet to be revealed. That's what we work on, and that's what we talk about every day. And so that's really the core process and the development that is actually most difficult, is sort of like consumer psychographics and figuring out how to teach somebody something without them knowing that they're actually learning it, so that it's just purely intuitive. And so while it may be intuitive to you or intuitive to me, the vast majority of people, I presume, given your position, that you're a technically minded person and have been around technology for a long time, the people who are every day, there's millions of new technology users who don't have that experience with technology, and yours and my experience is actually we're basically dinosaurs. We've been doing this for 20 odd years.
Sure.
And the new consumers coming online and getting their first phones are never going. They may not even they might not even need UX designers by the time those people are old enough to vote. It might just be voice commands to Alexa. It's like, Alexa, build me the coolest looking app in the world that's really easy to do, and then poof, it materializes out of thin air, and all the UX guys are like, but I went to school for this.
Yeah.
No, I think that's no, I 100% agree with you. It's interesting, and I love how you guys are kind of bringing technology and kind of almost like an intimacy between kind of bands and fans. And the thing that I kind of find interesting and kind of tie together, it's almost comparable to like when Twitter or like social media allowed you to reach out to people that you've kind of idolized, right? And I think this is almost like one step further, because it's even more intimate when you get to change and manipulate somebody else's art that you already admire, right? And I think that's in itself really cool. And I love how you guys are leveraging kind of both your music backgrounds and kind of a tech background to take what you guys are using and bringing technology into the music industry, which I don't think hasn't really necessarily been known for having the best kind of technology behind it sometimes, or and what I mean by that is like there's been kind of some disasters, I think, with kind of some of the DRM stuff, and obviously with torrents and file sharing and stuff like that, and kind of how it was handled just by the industry as a whole. I think to some people at least, they kind of failed that. So I love how you guys are trying to bring technology back into the music industry and kind of making it intimate and fun for the user. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with what you're saying. And just reflecting for a second on Subpop and how Subpop blew up at the onset, is that intimacy is really the key word. Intimacy is really the key word. Our fans were going to Nirvana shows at the beginning because they could see Nirvana in a small club. We were releasing records in limited editions. So we were constantly catering to the super fan, and the super fan wants connection with the artist. That's what a super fan is. And so if you can heighten that intimacy and that connection with the artist, that's how you're going to reach the super fan. And I think ASTEM really is doing a tremendous job at developing this potential for intimacy.
Sure, but I also think from the artist's point of view, it's allowing them to get exposed to new fans as well, right? As they adopt kind of new platforms to get their music kind of globally. Because I think the great thing about the internet is I literally have the entire world at my fingertips, but so does everybody else, right? And being able to create new ways to get your music and your art out to the world is very beneficial, because a lot of artists can't go ahead and build their own kind of tech startup that helps musicians. They just, that's not who they are, right?
Yeah, yes, I agree. I think the biggest challenge for any artist is, how does the artist develop the brand? How does the artist distinguish themselves? Okay. And so by engaging in a novel platform is an awesome opportunity for artists to distinguish themselves from the competition at this point. And this is one of the reasons why artists are starting to come to us.
Sure. No, that's great. So I know you guys are kind of working on an Android version. Are you guys eventually going to build a web version of this, or are you guys going to stay mobile?
Well, there's the back end of this is all driven from a web application that we've built that houses all of the audio, and it's kind of like an admin. There's an admin channel for content that exists there. On the I guess I just don't really know the answer to that question. What we strive for is a consistent audio experience across all devices that are using the system.
Got you.
And in order to get that consistent experience, you need you need fairly consistent hardware in order to make that work. And delivering it, we're pushing a lot of files through here. Pretty much every audio player from Spotify to Deezer and Pandora and everybody, that's basically like one audio player playing one audio file.
Sure.
Right? It's pretty simple. Deliver an audio file, play this file back. It's a very consistent experience across all devices. With 8stem, there are 64 audio players within our app that are each playing a little section of a file, and it's really difficult to create that experience across like various different internet connections and audio cards on computers and such. It's really challenging, and so there may be sometime in the future, if it was apparent that people really wanted that or needed that our users needed that, and we could provide a consistent experience, then we'd probably go for it. But at this point, it's so complex to really provide this experience to people consistently that it's like it's mostly hardware limiting. I mean, right now the horsepower that's in my my iPhone is equivalent to most, or exceeds performance of, most people's computers around the world. I mean, most of the world is pretty, sort of like, technologically unsophisticated.
Yep.
If you go outside of the West.
Sure.
So, everybody, it's like you can get a phone for, you can get an Android phone, which is what we're building for right now, for like, basically $100 US, pretty much anywhere across the world, you can go and get an Android phone. So the bar is really low. So that's our core focus.
But is that part of because I understand like loading that much data and kind of being able to live kind of edit that much data in the browser is extremely difficult, especially kind of audio, and to do it well, especially on kind of an older computer. But are you running into the same challenges with some of the maybe less, because like Apple hardware is obviously premium hardware. Like you can't argue that, right? But Android kind of spans everything from low end to mid range to kind of high end hardware. Are you having trouble getting some of that audio stuff working on maybe some of the lower end kind of phones, or is that not really an issue because you're running at least natively on the phone?
No, it's a technical challenge for sure. It's solvable, but
Sure.
It's like you got to, when you're, if you're developing for iOS, you're basically developing for 4 different devices.
Sure.
It's like one version in the past, current version, one version in the future. So right now we're not building out for iPhone 4s anymore. So we're just building iPhone 5, iPhone 6, and iPhone 7.
Sure.
And iPads are just covered under that.
Yeah.
With Android devices, there's such a huge variation in terms of processors and audio converters, and it's just like there's a lot of hardware variation. So there are like numerous challenges in order to deliver consistent experiences across that platform. It's really easy if all you're doing is, if you're building a messaging service or a web browser or even a video player is really totally basic, and there's plenty of libraries for that. But when you're doing something from scratch, that's part of the technical challenge, is figuring out, how do we actually get this so that it, we want kids in the middle of Africa who get like the lowest level phone possible. Those are the people that we're most excited about hearing from. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to interpret this music? And what are they going to produce that's going to feed energy into the system? So that's kind of like, that's the most exciting thing for us, is when, Kanye releases a track on 8stem in New York and it gets remixed by somebody in the Congo.
Yeah, that's amazing.
An hour later, and then reposted, and somebody else, somebody in Finland picks it up and then busts a rhyme over it, and it all gets kind of like blended together instantaneously. That's the kind of global juice that we're looking for and that we're most excited about.
No, I
absolutely
think,
global cross-pollination.
Sure. No, I think that's great, and I love how the internet kind of connects people like that, right? That's always been my fascination with the internet anyway. But I'm curious to know then, how do you guys plan on kind of monetizing this eventually, or have you guys kind of not gotten there yet?
There's numerous ways that we've got a bunch of things in place. I mean, we just turned on monetization kind of as a beta this week, actually.
Okay.
And we're just experimenting with different ways of actually selling content, and it looks and feels different than the traditional ways of selling content. It's not go to iTunes, pay $1.29, get this song, put it on your device and take it with you.
Sure.
It's more about the experience is the actual commodity. So in our app, you go through a catalog of songs, you select to play a song, a song plays, and it feels like a traditional music player, but there's buttons in there that allow you to change the style of the music on the fly. So if you're listening to a song that's like, a traditional pop song, you press a button, you press one button and the whole thing shifts into a dubstep version. And then you press another version and it shifts another button and it changes it to a breakbeat version. And then another button changes it into an ambient version. Sure. And then there's one other premium button where it's like, you pay $2 and all of a sudden you're taking a song by James Brown, for instance, and you're dropping Daft Punk stems onto it. And those Daft Punk stems will cost you $2.
Sure.
So it's actually like the experience of that, and then you can build on it from there and produce things out of that material. So it's a different, it feels differently on the end user experience, but essentially you're getting access to gated content.
Got you. I'm curious then, is it challenging kind of building that payment gateway around the audio, or it's not really any different than kind of charging for anything else on kind of the App Store or, the Google Play Store?
It's similar, but there's, it's kind of like what happens to it, excuse me, what happens to it after somebody actually gets access to it. Okay. So they make a payment, and then they get this content. And so the next step, that's a very simple transaction. That's like one person is the seller, one person is the buyer. You exchange $2 or $1 or whatever it is, and then you're done. But in 8stem, it never actually ends. You're never actually done because you're decoupled from a stereo file, and everything is dynamic. You can add things to a song, take things away, change it, share it with friends. So it's the complex part is actually looking at what's the sort of like waterfall effect from that content and how it gets shared to somebody else. And when new people come in to add additional things, like new artists come in to the system and contribute content that then gets used in other songs in the system, how does that transaction work, and how does that actually get valued and then ultimately monetized out of a new song that's created.
Sure.
And so it's like the first transaction is really easy, and we're just experimenting with that. But the bigger question is, how do you go into this sort of like fractional monetization strategies with content that happens downstream from that?
Sure.
And so that's the next piece that we're looking to build out. And it's all, everything that we're doing is, unfortunately for us, it's all from scratch because it's brand new and doesn't exist yet. But it's also very exciting because we get to participate in the solution for these. These are all problems that have plagued the music industry since digital files were introduced.
Sure.
How to track, how to monetize, how to see who's doing what, how to administer rights. And so we're right in the thick of that and trying to solve those problems.
Sure. So did you guys raise money? Did you self-fund? How did you guys kind of get this thing kind of up and running financially?
Well, we self-funded through self-funded through a prototype.
Okay.
And then we took the prototype to friends and family.
Gotcha.
And then raised money from friends and family, which have really got us through about like almost the past year and a half.
That's awesome.
Has been, we've been very capital efficient. When we originally started shopping this around, the bids to build it out It was just like astronomical, and there was no way that we were going to be able to raise that kind of money. We're talking millions of dollars.
Sure.
For something that was speculative, and nobody was really sure if it was actually going to work in the first place. That was kind of like because it hadn't been done, hadn't been proven.
Sure. Yep.
So we just, we just hustled, and we just got people who were able to work for equity, mostly, and who are highly skilled in what it is that we're doing. We built a team of people who are going like, let's go and revolutionize the music industry and go after the biggest play in the history of recorded content. I mean, that's what we're looking at, is to take existing music and fractal it out to an exponential degree, and really, revolutionize this whole thing, like really blow it up. And unfortunately, we were able to tell that story that in a way that got people inspired and willing to work it. So, we're out. The hustle is always, we're always raising money.
Sure.
That's what you do when you're in this game. But so far, we're working it right now, working a new round. And yeah, so now we're at the point now where we can actually go to market and scale it. And also we've just gotten contracts in place with major labels that I will not disclose specifically at this time, but we now have major label content coming into the system.
That's awesome.
Which we'll be able to go public with before the end of the year. But now the content equation is now is getting solved, so that we'll be able to present experiences of music, of songs that every single person in the world has heard, but present them in a totally new way that they never imagined.
No, I think that's great. So are you guys going to eventually open up the platform, say, like my favorite local band could upload their content 8stem and I could, play with their tracks? Or is that maybe down the future? Who knows? Have you guys thought about that?
Eventually it will. Right now we're kind of operating as a label. In that Bruce is curating the artists that are coming on board, and we're really, we're in an experimental phase where we're figuring out like what is remixable music and how do users respond to it. Right. Eventually, there'll be some way for us to filter out content so that it's based on followers and it looks more like a social network.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
But when we're looking to build that out, but so far the content pipeline is closed, or at least it's our say who gets in there. But eventually it'll open up and become it'll become a much larger ecosystem.
Sure. So I'm kind of curious to get both of your guys' thoughts on the current state of the music industry. And I'm sure you guys get asked that a lot, but not necessarily. I'm kind of curious to know from like the technical side and kind of what you guys see from the artist side. Kind of, is it the same or different than kind of the pre and post kind of technology revolution that swept kind of the industry in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Well, hey Bruce, why don't you take the artist one?
Sure. I guess my essential gut feeling is that pop music right now has never been more formulaic. And even though there might be some good tunes out there, compared to a golden era of music, let's say, just for instance, the 60s, when I grew up, sure, I could turn on the radio and listen to James Brown, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, Neil Young, and so forth. And it was there was a rich period of music there where labels were very artist-centric. And now I feel that because money has been so hard to come by in the music industry, the industry is becoming increasingly more conservative, and that really bothers me.
Sure.
I've always been inspired by creativity And this is why I was an indie rock activist for so long, trying to facilitate younger people to put out their music, and why I'm involved with 8STEM right now, because it's a creative tool that can empower young people. So my core opinion is that the industry is in a very stagnant, kind of uncreative period. A lot of artists who are living on the fringes with in indie rock are not making a lot of money, certainly with recordings. They're hustling with live shows. There is good music out there, but I think for the strong majority of musicians, it's been very hard to make a living, and that's affected the quality of, I would say, popular music right now.
Sure. No, I would agree with that. That makes sense. And Adam, from the technical side?
Well, it's funny, I mean, it's like from the technical side, it really is the golden era in terms of opportunity.
Sure.
Just because of the interconnectedness that the internet provides. But at the same time, so it's a golden opportunity. It's a golden era for opportunity, but it's also like the dark ages in terms of the ability for people to actually find things that are relevant to them, just because there's so much out there. So it's now fairly easy for, if you have a decent skill set and some technological tools, you can produce music. And there's plenty of examples of people who started making music 12 months ago and are now DJing in front of stadiums of people around the world. So it's
Sure.
The sort of historical discipline of creating music has basically gone out of the window and been enabled by technology, which has created a ton of music out there. And really kind of like it's almost like the listener is kind of an afterthought
Sure.
to the whole process. So it's a mixed bag technologically, and really the solution for it needs to be, music as a creative industry is an ecosystem, and it needs to be nourished at every step along the chain, from creativity to the people that make the software that makes the music industry go, to the delivery mechanisms and the payment processors. Everybody needs to be holistic. And so right now you have this, it's just kind of like searching for its equilibrium.
Sure.
Presently, and it's a complicated equation. And just for instance, Spotify is the biggest, it's like the biggest thing in music that ever was, and it's potentially the biggest thing in music that ever will be. It's has the same catalog of music as everybody else, as all of the other services, but they've managed to market it in such a way that has captured the world's attention. And the headline that I read this morning said Spotify's losses double even as its user growth surges.
Interesting.
So that was the headline this morning. So the bigger it gets, the more money they lose.
Yeah.
For some, for a number of there's a number of contributing factors to that. There's a much larger discussion around that, but it is impossible. Spotify lost over $600 million
in
wild. 2016.
Yeah.
It is not that, I don't care. It's a company. Spotify doesn't make a product. It doesn't have, postage is not an expense. It doesn't have delivery drivers. It is delivering digital files to users via invisible transmission lines around the world. And it is the biggest thing in the space. And it lost over $600 million last year. And so that's a severely broken system, and a broken for whatever there's a million contributing factors to that, but that's not sustainable.
And Bruce, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say it's really the Spotify situation is kind of a reflection of what's a microcosm what's going on globally with wealth distribution, where you have the CEO of Spotify probably worth the net amount of most indie musicians across the globe. You know,
Sure.
we need to distribute wealth more equitably with the artists, and once artists feel more empowered and they have some more cash, I think we're going to experience more of a renaissance, a cultural renaissance. But artists need to get paid, not just the CEO of Spotify.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think that's, that's key, right? Like I guess I'm kind of guilty in the sense that I actually pay for Google Play Music, which is obviously a competitor of Spotify. So I can, basically, I love my streaming music. I miss the days of going to, the record store and picking out a CD or a record or something like that. But the thing that's interesting is I still try to go to as many like live shows and, buy some merch or something from the bands that I love to see live, because that's kind of the only way they make their money, right? Because
Yep.
So I don't know. I'm curious to see how this whole thing sorts itself out and how the industry kind of, plays out in the next 3 to 5 years with everything. And the main reason I really wanted to have you guys on the show is if I can, leverage, my community to maybe help you guys. And I just love kind of talking to you guys about what you guys are doing, because I think it's really cool and it's much needed. But we're coming to the end of the show, so let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about 8STEM and any other links you guys want to mention.
Yeah, I mean, the App Store, head to the App Store and grab the app. If you're on iOS, if you're on Android, hit our website up, 8stem.com, number 8STEM, and drop your email so we can notify you when Android's done, and just engage, go out and create a remix, see what you think. If you can't figure it out, let us know. We just have it so you can just shake your phone and send us a message. It's super easy, and we respond to all those, and we're building it to suit. So go get it and create something.
Perfect, guys. Well, I really appreciate taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day and weekend.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.